They have no idea where we are, who we are, where we're coming from, or who we are, where we're coming from, or who we are, where we're coming from, or who we are, where we're coming from. And this is the best of the best. Wow. That is football.
All right, welcome to Gridiron Ratings. We got a special guest today. This is the Chop Shop, and the guest is Drew Davenport, the fantasy lawyer, the criminal attorney for everything you need to know in sports and so on and so forth. I'll let you do a better intro than that for yourself, Drew, but I'm joined again by Jeff. I'm Ronnie Evans. I'm knocking things around. I'm really excited. It's Saturday. It's going to be fun. Welcome to the Chop Shop. We got some legal talk to do here that's going to affect your fantasy teams. Let's go ahead and really quick, I'm going to put you in the spotlight here for a second, Drew. And that...
We're getting there. Yes, there we are.
New to you.
Hey, Ronnie, you cut yourself out of the stream for a minute there. Nobody could hear anything you were saying.
This is super high quality. HBO has got a contract with us, and we're trying to impress them. All right, let's go to Drew. Drew, let's do a little run through here. Give people the rundown on you and what you got going on.
Well, there's a lot going on. This is the time of year where it ramps up, and so it gets a little bit crazy. But you can find me on Twitter at Drew Davenport FF. I just started a TikTok page. I am pretty excited about that. I don't know if it's going to be any good, but I realized that I had a lot of things to say. So with the legal stuff, you do a thread, and sometimes it's 20, 30 tweets, and I know people get a little tired of that. So you can find me on TikTok, fantasy football lawyer. My writing is over at Football Guys this summer with all the auction content you can handle. I think we have the most auction content of any site out there.
Excellent. How are you liking the team over there at Football Guys? Have you interacted with Gary Davenport much?
So funny you should say that. Not through Football Guys. I've been with Football Guys since 2019, so this is my fourth summer. But Gary, actually, I met him in 2019 at the Kings Classic in Canton there. That was
amazing.
He is just a really good guy. He's fun to hang out with, very sarcastic, funny guy, and I like Gary a lot.
Yeah, he's one of we've got our own Gary over here with the IDP guru, and Gary Davenport just switched over to Football Guys, going from Fantasy Sharks. So I think he's doing both now. And we do a little IDP content on the show, but we don't really do a lot of auction talk. So maybe sometime later in the season when they're doing redraft auctions, we can have you back on and do some auction breakdowns with some of your content from over there.
That's one of my favorite things to talk about. Let me know.
Yeah, for sure. And then Jeff, anything new with you? Jeff's on Twitter at NFL_DiMatteo. How are the projections going?
Well, how did we describe it last weekend? It was a brain melting activity.
Yes.
Yeah, we're still there. It's still melting the brain. IDP is nearly wrapped up. Offense is wrapped up. So hopefully this weekend we'll have all 32 teams, every position figured out, at least on the first projections run here. So
excellent. Well, I'm really excited for those projections. I'm up at a different spot. I don't know if you can see the digs. I didn't get a new house. I'm up at our vacation home and having a good time up here. And Ruffy, our head scout, is somewhere out here barking in the yard. So if you hear him, it's because he's got the 2023 tape up and he's doing some homework for us. I don't think he likes what he's seeing. But anyway, so it's draft season, it's dynasty season, it's startup season. Jeff and I are actually in the middle of a startup draft right now, and there's a few players that are heavy hitters that have a lot of, I wouldn't call it animosity around them. They're one of them particularly, there's a lot of animosity for sure, but there's a lot of uncertainty kind of on what to expect, where you should take them, whether they're going to play a full slate this year, and things of that nature. And I went on Reddit, and you can see at the top of the live chat, there's a link to the thread. Got some questions from people over there for you, Drew, and let's go ahead and just start diving into those. And first one I'm going to put up here is from Captain Limp Wrist. This is just a general question, and then we'll start diving into Kamara. But how much will the Zeke suspension blowback that the league influence the league's decisions on Kamara and Deshaun? And do you think it'll have any?
Well, my short answer is I don't think it's going to have any effect because I really do believe that the league treats each case independently. There are some guidelines in the NFLPA handbook that I've read, and for substance abuse and things like that they use, but those are guidelines. Those aren't really playing off of that suspension. I don't think that the league cares too much. I think that they care about their image, and if they think what's going to be good for their image is doing X, Y, or Z, that's what they're going to do.
That's fair. That's fair. And you think that the changes in the recent CBA with Goodell's kind of full autonomy being pulled back a little bit had to do with the Zeke issue, or was it just a culmination of things?
I think it was a culmination of a lot of different factors. And what's funny is that I did a little bit of reading about that process now. I think that he has less autonomy, but I'm not really sure because when I read it, like he's still the final arbiter of what happens.
Yeah.
If the judge comes back and says, "Yeah, we don't like your decision," he can be like, "All right, cool, I'm doing it anyway." So, I do like the direction they're going. I think that that's important to have somebody independent taking a look at these cases, but
Sure.
I'm not sure that it's really in practicality. I'm not sure that it's a whole lot different.
Fair enough. Well, I think that I would agree with you there. In the end, the NFL does what they want always. So, it'll probably stay that way. As long as they're the biggest heavy hitter in the sports world, they're going to do what they want.
Well, with Kamara, if we're looking at him and we're trying to look at these cases individually, I mean, we have the question coming up, so I think we probably should pivot to Kamara a little bit here.
Mm-hmm.
What's going to happen with his charges? I guess they were in the state of Nevada. We've got the question here from Roxasor.
Yeah, it's a two-part question. He's like, I'd like to know the thoughts on the mandatory minimum sentence of a year for battery with serious bodily injury Kamara was charged with in Nevada. As I understand, it is not possible to plead a felony battery to a misdemeanor battery in Nevada. Is there any scenario outside of the victim not cooperating with police that would prevent Kamara from serving a year in jail?
Yeah, so I'm going to plead ignorance on the first part of the question. As a lawyer, one of the first things I always was taught was if you don't know, say you don't know. Don't act like you do. I'm not sure about the comment that they're not allowed to plead a felony down to a misdemeanor battery. I would guess in this situation, and this is, I want to be careful not to get myself in hot water here.
Sure.
I believe that when there is a celebrity involved or a pro athlete or something like that, that there is a very good chance that these kind of cases are looked at through a different lens. How about we say it like that? So I don't know how much they're going to stick to that idea. I think that if there is a reasonable argument to be made for a plea deal to be made where he doesn't have to serve mandatory time, I think it will be made and or offered. So I'm not sure how much effect that's going to have, but that's my guess.
Fair enough.
As far as the second part goes, the scenarios outside the victim not cooperating, there aren't many, and they really just involve who is the one thing that I can think about as a defense attorney. The argument that I would make is we haven't seen this video, but if you're looking at the video, can we tell who injured this person? And if his other buddies are the ones that are stomping on him while he's on the ground, I think that Kamara's defense team has a good argument to make that we're not the proximate cause of those injuries. So that while he may be likely, guilty of, misdemeanor assault or something, or misdemeanor battery, he's not the one who's responsible for the felony battery portion of it. So I think that's a good argument, but they hit on the other part where the victim not cooperating becomes a big part of it as well, if that were to happen.
Right, and that's kind of tying into, this is from NK the Great. Wants to know if it's likely, since Vegas has super harsh laws. We just talked about that a little bit. But to reiterate, where even if Kamara buys out the victim, can the DA then go and pursue and continue to press charges and pursue jail time with Kamara?
Yeah. The phrase buys out the victim makes me cringe a little bit.
It's not how things actually work.
Yeah, you're not supposed to be talking about bribing a victim in a criminal case, but some states that is okay, and I'm not sure what's common practice in Nevada, but I will say this: that it is possible sometimes for the victim to say, I feel as though I want X, Y, or Z to happen. And sometimes one of the things that they say is, I want to be compensated monetarily. And I don't begrudge anyone. If he got the crap kicked out of him and he thinks somebody should pay him some money, I don't have a problem with that. But so I guess the question becomes then, what will the prosecutor do or the district attorney do at that point? They can absolutely still go forward, even if the victim doesn't want them to. So one of the things I always say is, as soon as that case is filed, it's out of the victim's hands whether or not it gets dismissed. Now, I do also say that the victim has a lot of say in what happens. And I was corrected by my buddy Jordan McNamara the other day, who used to be a prosecutor, because I said it's kind of like the victim is the state's client. He said, no, that's not true. He's right. They're not actually the client. The state of Nevada is the client, but the victim is the person that the prosecutor will listen to a lot and say, what do you think? How do you want to do this? Can I offer a deal? Do you not want me to offer a deal? What is your opinion on sentencing? Stuff like that. So the victim has a lot of say in it, but ultimately the state can go forward whether or not the victim wants them to. And the important part here is, can you go forward without a victim? And with a video like this, I think the answer is probably yes.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So
Joe.
I guess the next question then becomes, with the way this investigation has to play out and drag through, do we expect this thing to see any kind of legal resolution this season, or is this going to be something that's going to get punted the next year and maybe a suspension takes place in 2023 instead of 2022?
That's my guess, because originally when it was filed and when it happened, I know the timeline of these criminal cases, I thought that there was a decent chance it would be resolved before the year. But what happened back on April 25th was they had a court date called negotiations. And that's essentially sort of like a pretrial where the prosecutor and the defense attorney and the judge have conversations about which way is this case going to go. Are we headed towards a motion to suppress or a trial, or are we headed towards a settlement, something like that? The interesting thing is it got pushed back to August 1st and nothing happened with the case. And the reason for that was the defense came to the court date and said, we just got some evidence late last week. We haven't even looked at it. And they referenced a video. I don't know if it's the video, but it's wild to me that the prosecutor wouldn't have gotten them that information more in advance of the 25th of April, because they had a court date. But the court said, continuance is fine. I'm surprised it's a 4-month continuance or 3.5 month. So what that does for the timeline is it really changes things, because it's not as if they continued it and they accomplished something on April 25th. They didn't do anything. So now we're in the same spot on August 1st.
Yeah.
So what I said is, if Kamara's team, which they probably will, says, hey, we want a trial, because that kind of just pushes the timeline out, it's going to be October or November before that case is even set to go to trial. And then at that point, one continuance gets us out into 2023. I think that's very likely that this case is not resolved until 2023.
So you're a pretty savvy fantasy player. Are you interested in Kamara with all of this looming, say in a redraft or an auction situation?
I'm not. And that's weird, because it's kind of feels like those are the opposite sides, because I don't know that he's going to get suspended this year. My problem is it's extremely unpredictable. I'll feel a little bit better after August 1st because I know what the defense team's thinking and what's happening. But between now and August 1st, I've said, I'm on the record as saying I want 0% of Alvin Kamara right now, because if he decides he's going to settle the case in August, a suspension could come, or at any point there's this thing hanging over his head, and it's that video. Yeah. And if that thing leaks and it's week 3, who knows what the NFL is going to do? I'm not into spending a 2nd-round pick and then having it yanked from me, just out on whim.
Well, and just to do a summary for people that weren't familiar of this, I pulled up this legal website's breakdown, and it sounds like basically what happened was Green got it. There's this video shows Green trying to get onto an elevator, puts his hand on Alvin Kamara puts his hand on his chest to keep him out of the elevator. Green then pushes Kamara out of the way, and Kamara's boys jump him. And then what the video then shows is him being punched and kicked repeatedly while he was on the ground. And at the end of the interaction, Alvin Kamara came in and started hitting him as well. And so that was the part for me that really alarmed me, because if it was a situation where he kind of threw in a punch in the middle of the whole thing and it was like a glancing, like I'm getting in the fray with my boys, but to have it sound like he actually came in at the end while the guy was already on the ground and fairly out of it, if this is all true, and a video of that leaks, I don't think the NFL would. I think they'd suspend him within 6 hours. Like that would be my hunch. Like, maybe get out of here. Because you remember the Ray Rice thing. It's Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, but I don't know about you, but I don't want that. Any of my players going into the season. The season's hard enough with attrition with your players. That I just don't want. I don't want that. But I'm a very risk averse fantasy player. Right now, Alvin Kamara, as a first round talent, is going in the mid to end of second. If you're into that, go for it, because there's a chance, and I think it's a decent chance that he plays the whole year. So I just don't like waking up every day.
League.
Yeah, and I just don't want when that fantasy life notification buzzes in my pocket. I don't want to always be going, oh, please don't be Kamara, for the next 3.5 months. So that's just me. Can I point out a couple things about the video?
Sure. Go ahead.
Before we move on.
Please.
Yeah, a couple things I've been saying, and I want to be careful because nobody that is reporting on this video has actually seen the video for the most part. Now, there are some police officers and some people involved with the case who have seen it, and they've written a report about it. But a lot of times people are reading the report and then reporting on the report. So we're getting like a third-hand account of what this video shows. So just be careful, because I've always said that we just don't know what it shows. Having said that, if it shows what they're saying it shows, it's real bad, because they have put out a count for how many times they believe each individual struck this guy. And I believe the count for Kamara was 8 times.
Yeah,
and
8. At least in this article I just read. Yeah.
Right. And at least once after he was unconscious, they have counted. And that's at least one time. And I will say this, from my experience of doing these kind of cases, there's nothing that'll make a judge sit up quicker and a prosecutor push harder than an unconscious victim and people stomping on them. That has been a sore spot for a lot of cases I've been in, and I think that'll be the case here too. So
okay, I'm gonna get on my phone and start trading all my Kamara shares right now.
I know, I've been trying to. So let's jump away from the legal stuff and take 2 minutes really quick and talk a bit about what Jeff and I have talked a lot this offseason about, this running back tool that he's put together that does a great job of accumulating touch stats, age stats, everything to kind of predict breakoffs. And it's pretty accurate. Went through and looked back over the last few years, and it like nails it on every single one. And all this legal stuff aside, Kamara is getting to that point. He's at the right age, right, Jeff, and he's at the right touch threshold where he is going to be a high-risk asset for injury and decline over the next 12 months.
He's a 260. Yeah, he's a 260 touch season away from being a real crash candidate.
Yes. And so in Dynasty, like, the right time is always to sell at the end of a player's peak. And legal stuff aside, that's been my thought with Kamara anyway, is, I if you're a contender, it's hard to move a guy like that. But if you can move him and go get like a Kenneth Walker, something like that, come next year, you might be happy. And Alvin Kamara might be in jail next year. So then you'd be really happy. Maybe you'd sell with Henry Ruggs.
Oh,
wow. Well, I do. I agree with you on Kamara. Not only is all of what you said just very true and insightful, but on top of that, that situation in New Orleans is just giving me all the wrong vibes, and it just continues to get more murky. I don't know what to think about the offense with Peyton gone and Dennis Allen in charge.
Yeah.
And then they've added these guys who, I was just talking about this with somebody a couple nights ago, that I really feel like they have similar profiles on how they get the ball in the short area of the field. And I'm worried about Winston and Dennis Allen and Jarvis Landry, and there's just enough things there that I'm not even sure that he'd be my guy in the first round this year if there were no issues with the legal stuff. So second round, I've been looking at him and just like, nah, I don't care. He's got to slip farther for me to be interested in that, and that's really only in redraft. So
I'll tell you what, last bit on Kamara, and then we'll punt and we'll move on. So I think you brought up an interesting point. He's got to slip a little further. Where does that draft capital meet the risk threshold that you feel comfortable taking him?
I figured that was the next question. That's a good question. To be real honest, this is going to sound crazy, but 4th round. I like him in the 4th.
I'm good with that.
And that's really only if I could get him as my RB3. And that's so I would go into auctions chasing him as my RB3 for a reasonable price. And if he kind of falls off the cliff and I can get him for $21 as my RB3, that's what I'm talking about. I'm in on that.
JJ just really quick hopped in and says that the Drew Davenport, love seeing him on the Stratum.
Love JJ. He came to Canton last year and got to hang out with him, and he did our auction at the Hall of Fame. So yeah, JJ's a good dude.
Hey JJ, hey Drew, good to see each other. All right, let's move on to Dalvin Cook here and the Alvin Kamara thing. Jeff and I will bring up more stuff with Alvin Kamara as the offseason progresses, and we'll be keeping in touch with that. And again, Drew's at Drew Davenport FF on Twitter. So like if you want immediate legal updates or somebody to ping and ask about these things, Drew's there. Just don't ask him a million questions about Kamara because we just covered them all. Watch the show.
I'm always here for questions.
All right. So when I got on Reddit, I had initially brought up Deshaun Watson and Kamara and the suspension likelihood for them moving forward. And everyone was like, Dalvin Cook. Talk about Dalvin Cook. Bronton 21 is like the ongoing legal situation, right? This guy said, I'd love to hear more about this too. It's Z Club 66. I got a Cook trade I've been holding off on until I find out more. Somebody else said that Cook was a victim in this thing, and then he was corrected. And this guy said, no, a criminal domestic violence case was filed against him. He filed a counter civil and defamation case, if I'm remembering you correctly, to what Drew said recently. So what is going on with Dalvin Cook? And should people be wary of a suspension coming into this season? And is it anything we really need to worry about in general?
Well, the first thing I'd clear up here is I don't believe there's a criminal charge against Cook. That I've not heard that. If that's the case and I missed it, then I'm failing at my job at the moment. But I don't think there's not. Yeah, I don't believe that there is, and I think it would have been a bigger deal, and we would have heard about that. But it is correct that he filed a counter suit. What's weird is that she originally filed the suit, and it was for a couple of different, intentional torts, and those are intentional infliction of emotional distress and that kind of stuff. And he filed his counterclaim, which is normal. But then he did a weird thing. He went to another county and filed his own suit. And the judge in the original suit was kind of like, what are you doing? Minnesota has a law or a civil rule on the books where they're going to handle the first one filed first. So I'm not sure what the point of that was. I'm not a civil law expert. I used to do plaintiff's work before I became a criminal law expert. So I know a little bit about it, but I don't know why they would file that in a separate county. It definitely muddies the waters a little bit, but I think really Cook was just trying to get his defamation suit on the books. But at any rate, my understanding of the situation with Cook is a lot different than the situation with Kamara or some of these other cases. I have said all along that after examining what's going on in this Cook suit, it is so messy that I don't believe the NFL wants to touch this thing with a 10-foot pole. So I really believe that Cook is going to be okay in this case. And I think that the long-term prognosis isn't bad either, because I don't believe that there's going to be some resolution to this case where it's found that Cook did all these horrible things with absolutely no rejoinder from his camp. And he's actually done a very good job of coming out of the gate swinging. Like, you were a problem too in this relationship. And I don't doubt that things went both ways here. I don't have any clue what happened behind closed doors. Nobody does. I'm working on open source information. But the first thing that Cook did was push back on the narrative that he had assaulted her in his home, because he put out the information in this countersuit that she had showed up at his house and gone into his garage and taken she had used a garage door opener that she still had from his house, gone into his garage and gone into the house that way. And so his whole claim is she never should have been there in the first place. I had the right to defend myself in my home. So this is an extremely messy fact pattern. And the thing I always make an analogy to is when I was in law school and I was taking a test, the professor would write the test so that you had great arguments to make on both sides of the case. It was like written right down the middle, so you could take one side or the other, and he would make you take one side or the other. That's how I feel about this Cook case. There are some really compelling points on both sides of the case. And as a result, I really believe that the NFL doesn't want to step in here and substitute its own judgment. This thing is going to go for a while in the civil courts, and I'd be shocked if some huge, bomb was dropped out of this case. We've heard a lot of the salacious details already. I'm not sure anything bigger is coming. If it does, of course, that changes things. Right now, I feel fairly good about Cook, short term and long term.
Interesting. All right. Well, there you go. So going back to Zeke Club here, holding off on a trade. Go ahead and do it, man. Green light. He's fine. He didn't do nothing.
That's not what I said.
Bad paraphrasing.
Objection.
No, I'm not saying he didn't do anything, but I'm not worried about him right now from a legal perspective and an NFL suspension perspective.
Well, and this isn't his first run-in with something like this. He was found not guilty in an assault misdemeanor while he was at Florida State. But, in the end, you heard it from Drew Davenport. Dalvin Cook's an angel. He's good to go.
Oh my gosh, this guy's killing me.
Yeah, I know. Good grief. We're at the muzzle
disclaimer.
Ronnie.
I'm gonna run a disclaimer along the
way. Yeah.
I can get you a banner on there, no problem.
No. So Drew gave a really good breakdown though, and it sounds like this, from my understanding, just to recap for people, this thing has a lot going on both sides, and it sounds like Cook did an interesting sort of like a PR assault on the whole thing to muddy the waters initially, and has made it at a point where it's not going to be clear enough for the NFL to come in and drop judgment. And also there's no video. And that's always like the running joke with the NFL. If there's a video, you're screwed. But, it's true. There's no video. So
let me drop in with something interesting. Right after I ran my Cook thread, his agent contacted me and said, "Hey,
interesting.
Can you say this and this and this?" He was wanting me to be his mouthpiece. I said, "No, but you're welcome to come on my show and talk about it." But he sent me a video, and I think this video made its rounds on Twitter, so this isn't secret. But he sent me a video of what he claims to be that incident where the two of them were having like a back and forth. The thing is, the video is supposed to be something interesting or helpful. I didn't think it did anything. It was just kind of the two of them bickering with each other, and there was nothing on the case. The phone was being held towards the ground, so you could only see the ground and just hear the voices. I didn't think it was anything that exciting. He sent it to me as if like it proved something, and then he just kind of didn't come on the show. So I wasn't going to be his mouthpiece after that. So
well, good for you. You shouldn't. Yeah, you could be our mouthpiece though. If we ever get in trouble, we know
who we're coming to.
Yeah,
I'm there. Expenses and everything, first class. I have to fly first class though.
Of course. I thought we'd send the private jet. We'll send the GR jet, and that's what we'll do.
Yes.
Somebody did ask on Reddit a joke question. You don't need to answer this, but just in light of that, they were like, I'm dealing with some stuff. What does he charge per hour? What's the rate? What should I do here?
I'm cheaper than most people because I've got a day job. So you can come to me, and it's easier for me to just, charge you a little bit less.
You can go and do a fantasy auction draft during your arraignment and like two birds with one stone. It's great. Perfect lawyer. So,
well, let's talk a little bit more about Dalvin. So we're out of the legal weeds, right? We think he's going to play. Obviously he's a first round talent, right? Tons of volume. There's been some reports coming out that he could be playing some wide receiver this year. You get this kind of garbage this time of the year with almost every running back.
Yep.
How you feeling about this guy? You thinking like running back 4 or 5? Like, where do you place him in your hierarchy?
Yeah. I've been surprised at the sort of lack of enthusiasm about him. I don't know if that's from the legal stuff. People are concerned, but I do a mock with a bunch of analysts once a month. And it's just a 12-team, 1 QB, but we do it to like sort of track ADP, like where players are going up and down. And the very first one we did, I got Cook at the 1.07. And I thought that was a little odd. I thought, well, why is he falling to 7? So I'm all over him at that point. I think he's probably my RB4. My thing is I don't have Derrick Henry up there. I know a lot of people do. He's a guy.
Preaching to the choir, baby.
Yeah, I'm fading Henry. So I like Cook a little bit more than most people do. I saw a thread somewhere on Twitter recently that talked a little bit about his TD rate last year. He got plenty of red zone touches. Didn't convert him this year for the first time in a couple years. So I'm not sure the wheels are ready to fall off yet for Cook. I'm in on him for redraft for one more year at a top 5 level.
Well, and dynasty-wise, I mean, he's another guy that's kind of entering that touch threshold and age thing, but he's younger, right? He's not Derrick Henry. He's not
Right.
looking at 30 and 5,000 touches and already injured because of the touches and plays. He's a finesse back, right?
Although he seldom finishes a season. And so
he does get injured all the time. And you got to factor that in, though, with Cook. If you're taking Cook
Mhm.
as your one, you're going to take another running back, and you're going to get another running back in the top 6 rounds because you know you're going to have to play somebody in place of him. What has it been, like 4 straight years where he's missed 2 games or more?
Yeah. Or if you're me, you take Alexander Madison so you can sleep at night.
Right,
bingo.
right.
That's it. That's what I was going to say. I was like, if
A
you're
lot of
taking
people
Cook,
don't like that. Yeah.
reach on Madison and just get it done. You'll feel a lot better about life.
You remember the Mike Boone days? It's going to be Boone.
I have Boone on a dynasty team and gave him an unfortunate 2-year contract. Whoops. I thought he'd work his way in there in Denver, but
He's
I was
he's an explosive
wildly
guy,
wrong.
but they like Gordon and they
It's
like
okay.
Javonte.
You can make fun of me. It's all right.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
so-
you can't win them all. That's where I'm at. You know,
That is
as long as you win
exactly
more
right.
than half, you're all right. But I think we should probably get to the elephant in the room, huh? Should we hit the big one? Should we?
Yeah,
about
let's
the big
talk
guy?
about Deshaun Watson. Let's stay away from personal feelings, anything like that. But Jeff and I are not experts on the NFL's disciplinary side of things. And Deshaun, it sounds like he's cleared up most of his off-field court stuff for the most part. Add anything you want to for that. But what people really want to know is is he going to get suspended this year? What are your thoughts there? Where should we be valuing him? And if he does, what's a range of outcomes?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question. It's very difficult right now because one of the things that I always tell people is you mentioned Gary Davenport earlier. I am not an NFL punishment expert. And when I said that on Twitter the other day, he replied and said, well, who could be? And I said, the sentiment's true. It's hard to tell what's going to happen with a situation like this, really any situation. But the Watson case, I made this point on TikTok the other day. It is a very, as a lawyer, I want to look for precedent. There's no precedent for this case because there's no precedent for a guy with 22 women accusing him of the things that he's been accused of. And it's very weird because when I originally read the cases, when they were filed, I read the complaints and I had the same opinion that apparently the grand jury did, was that only a couple of these things even were approaching criminal territory. Some of the stuff was just gross, nasty stuff that he shouldn't have been doing. But then there were a couple that were absolutely, if they were true, were criminal. So the point being, it's a very unusual case. There's just a wide range of things he's accused of doing. Everything from just exposing himself to forcing someone to do something sexually. So the precedent with the league, there just isn't any to look at. So we're left to sort of just make these bad comparisons. Okay, well, this person got this much. He's got to get more than that. And what I said was, well, Antonio Brown got a felony conviction. He got 8 games and he didn't even hurt the guy. And so I've been talking about that with respect to Kamara and also with respect to Watson, the fact that he didn't get any criminal charges. The thing that I keep coming back to is the NFL really doesn't act necessarily only on the facts. They act on what's the public going to say when we act. So if they come out and they say, apparently we're supposed to get some guidance in June. That just came out today that the NFL has said in June they're going to give us some direction, which is fantastic. Got to be honest, this case is exhausting. But
yes. It's disheartening to read about too.
It is. It's horrible. And these women, their lives are different now. They're forever changed. It's been difficult for them. It is difficult for us to talk about it and understand that there's 23 lives at stake here, including Watson. And that's hard. It wears on me. But anyway, the point being, in June, we're supposed to get some direction here. And what I've said all along is I can't imagine that they're just going to come out and be like, all right, cool, everything's fine, no harm, no foul. I just can't imagine that happening. But yet they've surprised me before, cough, cough, Tyreek Hill. And I don't think that we can say that we know what's going to happen. The one thing I've said is that if you had asked me a couple months ago, will he get suspended in 2022? I would have said almost definitively, yes, it's coming. Now I've upped my percentage that he'll escape any suspension this year to maybe 20 to 30%. So I've upped that from near 0 to 20 to 30%. Now that still means I believe there is a 70 to 80% chance he gets suspended this year. I just can't imagine them looking the other way and saying, nah, you're good. But the major X factor here is we don't know what the NFL found out when they talked to these women and when they
Right.
talked to Watson. We don't know what they've uncovered and what their threshold is for what they consider to be violating the personal conduct policy. I would think that something is coming. I just don't know how many games. And I've said that my suspicion that they could push this off to 2023 is slowly growing, because it would be weird for them to just stand up and say, hey, we're going to suspend you while the civil case is going on. So those two things are really at war in my brain, and I can't figure them out, because if they do stand up and say, hey, we're going to suspend you, I wonder if that sort of inserts them in the criminal discovery process, or the civil discovery process, where then somebody's going to say, okay, well, we want the NFL investigator in here to talk about this, and we're going to use as exhibit, 496, the NFL suspended him. And so, this guy, I don't know if they want to insert themselves in that process.
Yeah.
That would be odd. So I don't know how to square those two sides that are warring in my brain. I really don't.
So in a dynasty league, though, like redraft, I think that Dalvin, like he missed last year. He hasn't played football in 18 months. He's fine. He's going to be fine long term once he gets back on the field. We all know he's an elite talent. But redraft, you're probably sitting on this guy, and if you can get him late, that's a gamble. But get another quarterback just in case.
Right.
Dynasty, though, like we're in a startup right now, and it's an IDP startup, and we're in round 9, round 10, and Watson's not off the board yet. And 2 years ago, he would have been off the board in round 5. Yeah,
that's me drafting him in the day.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah,
yeah. And Jeff and I, we're not going to take him. We got Herbert and Mahomes already,
This
so
is
we're
high
fine.
level stuff, guys.
Yeah, but it is interesting. The PR side of it, I think that's always the public's perception of the NFL is in the end they care more about PR than they do justice. And whether that's true or not, you hit some really good points there. It's yeah. It is true.
I mean, I for Dynasty, I'm okay investing in him because I don't think that the NFL is just going to come out and be like, all right, 2-year suspension. I just don't think that's happening. I think it's possible on the extreme end of things that he gets a year. But I don't know that that's happening either. I don't know that the NFL is going to do that, but I don't know. So I'm happier with him in Dynasty. But I've been taking some shots in best ball and redraft because he's been going so late. I'm buying the dip a little bit in best ball right now.
Well, and then also just a side note on the PR thing, I come from the marketing world, and so I get sensitive to public perception of things. But if you suspend him this year, let's just call it 1 quarter per woman. So it's a 6-game suspension, right? It comes up to 23.6 quarters, rounded up. Or maybe they let him come back in the 4th quarter of the 6th game. But then you have basically this guy coming back in the middle of the season that everyone is like, well, you said that you suspended him, which means he probably did this. So we don't know how to feel about it. Why is he still playing? And it's almost like, well, if they're going to do it, maybe it would be better just to cut, be like, you're out for a year. We're going to let the public forget about this thing, and you can come back next year. And that seems like a better PR move for the NFL than doing a half season or a 6-game or 8-game or whatever it would be.
To me, the most interesting part of it was, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, Drew.
No, you're good.
The Browns structured this contract in such a way where the big money hits in year 2. If you go through it year 1, they pay him minimal. It's like $1 million this year or something little like that. When you think of the scope of this enormous mega monster contract, it almost makes me wonder if the Browns were saying, hey, we're going to go ahead and make sure any money lost due to suspension is minimal. So we're going to give you just $1 million or $1 million a game, whatever it worked out to, for year 1. And then we're going to pile all your money after that. I wonder if the NFL looks at that and says, this is kind of a slimy thing. We're not going to suspend you until next year.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's going on behind closed doors. That's a great question. And I've heard people talking about the contract. My understanding is it's not that unusual to make the first part of the contract a little bit light because of what they've got on the books. I don't know if they would use that as a part of their decision-making process, but the one, thing that I think is very possible is that weird agreement that the plaintiffs and the defendant made that they're not going to have a trial in this case during the football season. I think it's very possible we're talking about this case again in 2023, and the NFL might say, "Hey, we found out some things, but we're not gonna step in the middle of this civil case." This is a wild case, folks.
Dude, what if the Browns go win the Super Bowl and then they deal with this next offseason and then they have to suspend him?
Man, that's why I just don't know that the NFL can just say ollie outs and free and you're good to go this year. There's got to be something happening.
I'll tell you what, we should find out what happens in June when we get more clarity, when we get that information in. And we'll have to get you back on. Maybe we get you on with JJ on Rider Dynasty and see what we can do about maybe clearing the air a little bit further. If that's all right.
For sure.
But if we get past the legal stuff for a minute, right? Let's just say everything comes back. He's cleared, whatever. There's no suspension this year, at least. This guy still hasn't played football on a professional level in over a year. Like, what's the precedent for this non-injury related? Like, the guy hasn't been at practice. He hasn't been practicing. He hasn't been throwing in. He's not in football shape, is he? Like, are we really comfortable with this cat just stepping in and being elite again?
I'm not 100% comfortable with placing him in the same category he was before. There was a couple things working in his favor. I mean, the Texans had a horrible defense the whole time he was there. Right. He was also playing in Houston, playing in good weather, and playing in the AFC South. So you have a completely different situation with a pretty good Browns defense. You're playing in Baltimore, in Pittsburgh, home games in Cleveland. I mean, we saw what the weather in Cleveland did last year for, I think, 2 different games. Or was that 2 years ago? Regardless, the point being, he's got a completely different situation. And Stefanski isn't a guy that wants his quarterbacks to drop back and have a 60%, situation neutral pass rate. That's not him. He wants to work off play action. And it's not that I don't think that Watson can be productive. I do think he can, but I'm not placing him in that elite, hey, this guy could be QB1 territory this year. I want to see more. And I'm thinking that, let's say all this stuff magically cleared up and we said, where do we place him? I still think he's like QB6 for me, something like that, rather than, QB2 or 3 or something.
Sure. Well, I think that's fair. And even in Dynasty, there's a bazillion young quarterbacks now that look like they all have promise. And so, I don't know. The Deshaun thing, I guess, to answer everyone's questions on Deshaun, if they had any, is like, you got to wait and see, but something's going to come eventually, maybe.
Well, we should have some clarity in June, it sounds like, on some level, or at least with the guidance coming out. So hopefully that'll help. I mean, truthfully, you're a little higher on Deshaun than I am. I'm looking at him as a QB2. I don't have him in the top 12 right now. I'm just expecting the rust, the weather, getting acclimated to your new toys in terms of Amari and David Bell and Njoku and these guys, new scheme. There's so many things working against this guy to have not played in a year. I just feel like maybe we need to temper expectations for year 1 and then year 2. If everything still wheels up, then that's when we're going to start seeing that guy who's a locked-in QB1 again. But, what do I know? I'm just some guy on a YouTube podcast. I don't really know anything.
I think that's reasonable. I don't disagree with that logic.
All right, let's do a couple rapid fires really quick, and then we can wrap up this discussion with you and get you to your birthday, man. Right back to your birthday.
Your wife's going to be home soon. We got to make sure we'll get you off here before she gets home. There he is.
Yeah.
All right.
Alarm. Sorry.
User life's a bleach. What is the NFL suspension ruling that was the most surprising or least consistent from what their norms for suspensions were?
That's a good one. The Zeke one was weird, but it does not beat the Tyreek Hill thing. And I think maybe this is just because I got burned on that. That was one of the first major cases I covered for Football Guys, and I got completely burned on it because I learned an invaluable lesson when I was doing that case, and I'll keep this short. When you're looking at these kind of cases, from my perspective of practicing law now, I'm in my 21st year, and what you see is that abusers, guys who don't get it, who use violence, who have grown up with violence or still currently are around it, they use certain kind of language and they talk a certain way, and when they start to take that stuff seriously, their language shifts a little bit. How they approach these things shifts. And I always say that you have to pay attention to that stuff because it is a future problem waiting to happen. And so when I heard that phone call that everyone heard between Hill and his the mother of his child, and he said something like, you should be scared of me too, or something like that.
Right.
I thought, whoa, okay. Now, I don't know about you fellas, but I've never said that to a woman in my life, no matter the circumstance. And that right there was a huge red flag that there was something going on behind the scenes in that case. The reason I got caught short was the judge sealed all the records from the case and didn't allow any of it to get out. And I think the NFL just didn't have enough to suspend him. I thought for sure he was going to get hit because that case looked nasty to me. And,
So it's not the
didn't happen.
Deflategate suspension?
That was pretty weird, but I wasn't covering football back then. But yeah,
Fair
that's pretty weird.
enough.
I'll tell you, if I ever said some stuff like that to my wife, she would whoop my ass.
Yeah, my wife would kick my ass and she'd be gone in 10 minutes. So
No, that's I don't need that kind of pressure in my life.
All right, Sam G 42236 says, "Will Henry Ruggs ever play football again?"
I'd have to say right now, yes. But I think it's a qualified yes, because I think that when we're talking about this kind of case, he's hired a really good defense attorney. They're haggling over every single detail here, which is what a defense attorney is there to do. I do think it's possible that this case ends up with Ruggs maybe being able to come back in a couple years. I don't know if it'll happen or not. And I think that right now I'm not on the side of 90% he's coming back. But if I had to pick a side right now, I'd say yes. Time heals a lot of wounds, and I don't think it's happening this year and maybe not even the next year. But I think it's possible. The guy's young, and I think it's possible that it still happens. If I had to pick a side, I'd say yes.
That said, I'm not like stashing him on my dynasty squads.
No.
He's a speed back, and if he comes back, he's going to be in his mid-20s essentially as a sophomore, and then, there's a billion wide receivers coming out right now anyway.
I'm with you on that.
Last one, another wide receiver.
Username there, LKOL Fantasy Burner.
Who's LKOL?
I don't know. That's why I was like, I don't know who LKOL. Why do they need a fantasy burner? But that's the username. It's super weird.
Calvin Ridley, does he have any grounds to fight the suspension?
Not really, no. This stuff's pretty clear, and my understanding is they were actually watching him, from what I've heard, and then he logged on and placed a bet and was tagged immediately. So I don't really think there's a whole lot here. Yeah, I don't like to say that about people, but certainly a poor decision.
Yes. Yeah. Not a decision full of intelligence.
I mean, would it be too soon to see if he's got any DFS takes?
Ouch. Zing. Take that, Calvin. I know you're watching.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, just real quick, I know you dug into Willie Gay a little bit. What's your 30-second takeaway from that whole situation for people in IDP Dynasty?
Yeah, you threw me for a loop there because I had not been following it, but I looked into it. It looks fairly straightforward. This looks a little bit like the Jerry Jeudy case, although a little bit more like it sounds like he destroyed some stuff, but it might have been his own stuff, which I don't. So I think what's happening right now is he's going through a diversion program, which is something in the legal community that's fairly straightforward. You have a couple tasks to complete. For an example, like let's say this is not the case in his situation, but let's say the charge is you broke somebody's window out. You would have to pay for their window and get it replaced. And then you'd have to maybe go through some community service, pay a fine, do some anger management counseling, something like that. I don't know what he is being tasked to do, but my understanding is he's in the diversion program. And there's a court date that was in May, but they pushed it back to June. That could mean that either he's not been accepted into diversion yet because he hasn't done what he's supposed to do, or that he just needed more time to complete what he's supposed to complete. But it sounds to me like he's going to get diversion, which means that he'll earn his way out of the charge. It'll eventually be dismissed once he completes what he's supposed to do.
Fair enough.
Nice.
Well, I appreciate all of that insight. I think that the really big takeaway is, just to recap, the Dalvin Cook thing is probably going to be fine. The Alvin Kamara thing is way too sticky to invest anything heavy in him right now. Deshaun Watson thing, we're going to get some more clarity coming here in about a month. And then just like the Jerry Jeudy thing, I still don't really understand that. We don't even need to bring it up, but he's fine, right?
He's fine.
He's already back with the team, I think.
Good enough. He's fine.
And then my only other question for you is, do you play poker?
Oh, yes.
How would you feel about joining myself and Justin Varnes is in, and probably a bunch of other fantasy people are, but I had this idea to do a poker roundtable show each week during the season where we play a game of poker like on screen and chit chat about fantasy while we're playing. And then we can donate the proceeds to whatever charity the winner picks.
I mean, let me think about I'm in.
Okay.
He's happy to take your money, Ronnie. That's what he meant by that.
I thought you were joking at first because do you guys know I'm running the poker tournament at Canton?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's the first year. So Football Guys is sponsoring it. I brought it up to Bob Lung and said, hey, let's do a poker tournament at the expo. And he said, sounds great. So it took off immediately. There's 60 seats for the first year. We're going to see if we get enough interest and maybe make it bigger.
What are you doing for the buy-in?
The buy-in's $50.
Okay.
But to avoid the legality of just like holding a poker tournament, we had to sort of make it like a little party. So it's going to be like an icebreaker party with music, food, and then we'll have the tournament and there'll be giveaways. So like just coming to the thing, you can buy a ticket to just come to it, not play or play. And you'll be entered into like drawing for like autographed jerseys and stuff like that.
Very cool. Nice. That's awesome.
It's going to be awesome. There's only 8 seats left if you guys want to get to Canton.
Jeff, we need to talk about that.
All right. After the show.
Where are you guys located?
I'm in Atlanta, man. We both are. Yeah. Hop, skip, and a jump away, man.
Yeah. Fly to Cleveland, rent a car, drive down to Canton. It's a fun weekend, man. It's going to be great.
Definitely take a look.
Poker thing, I'm in.
All right, excellent. Well, I'll probably in a month or so, I'll shoot you a message on Twitter with some deets.
With that, you'd mentioned donating the proceeds to charity. Drew, I know there's a couple charities near and dear to you. We talked a little earlier about the Innocence Project and the Artemis Center. Do you want to pop in a few words about either of those? Kind of let some folks know about these things that you're involved with.
Yeah. So the Innocence Project is something that's really important to me as part of the criminal justice system. You understand that every day, people go to work and they're people and mistakes are made. And there are people sitting in jail who need an advocate for them. And the Innocence Project does that. And they've done excellent work over the years. I fully trust them as a charity. The other one that we talked about was the Artemis Center in Dayton. You can just Google Artemis Center Dayton. And if you want to give them $5 or $10, anything works. But it's a domestic violence shelter. But they also provide counseling for the women involved in those situations, as well as family counseling for children as well. So they do excellent work. And domestic violence shelters are just so important. And I deal with domestic violence every day. I have to defend the people who are accused of domestic violence, but that doesn't mean I don't understand all the dynamics of it and understand how important it is. So Artemis Center of Dayton.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Well, I have the links for those too. I appreciate you sending those to me. I know birthday weekend, anniversary weekend, we really appreciate you being here as part of a little bit of our appreciation for you making time for us. We're going to go ahead and make donations to both of those charities in your name. So look forward to that. Keep your eyes open for all that. And, is there anything else you want to take us out on?
$5 million.
Probably going to be like $50 each. I got to be realistic here.
5 million rubles.
You misunderstood. That's my appearance fee.
$5 million rubles. We'll send you a check for $5.
Let me get the Amex out. Hold still. Okay.
Well, I, in all sincerity, I really appreciate that. That's awesome, guys. Never had anybody do that for me before. So actually, I should scratch that. One guy did for a one-on-one I did last summer. But thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And look me up on TikTok.
Yeah, we'll do that. I'm excited. Hey, you done any dances yet?
No, there will be no dancing. No, I've had some people ask me, and it's kind of funny because
all the NFL touchdown dances.
One of my favorite gifts is the Jean-Claude Van Damme. If you go into and search Jean-Claude Van Damme, he's doing that cheesy 80s dance with the and so I was like, maybe one day I'll recreate the 80s Van Damme.
Maybe we could do that as a punishment for the poker thing.
I shouldn't have.
The loser has to do a TikTok dance.
Yeah, no, that works. You guys will You will have a good laugh. I am not the most artistic person when it comes to that.
All right. Well, we'll check. What's your TikTok handle?
A fantasy football lawyer.
Fantasy football lawyer. Gotcha. Well, Drew, I appreciate it. We really appreciate you hopping on. Go ahead and go get back to your birthday stuff, your anniversary stuff. Congrats on all of that as well.
You bet. And let me tell you this too. If you love poker, you asked me about it. I talk poker a lot on my show because I really think there's an analogy between poker and auction drafting. So I talk poker on my show. If you ever want to give it a shot, have a listen. And it bores some people, but most people want it. And so that's what we do.
Well, if you ever want to have a poker-centered show and need somebody to hop on and talk about it with you, hit me up.
You and Sam Wagman. Sam Wagman's a huge poker guy too. So I'm thinking about doing one of those. So you'll be at the top of the list.
Excellent.
Thanks again, guys, for having me. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Drew.
Thanks, Drew.
Alrighty.
So, Jeff, that was awesome. Lots of really good insight there. I'm surprised about the Dalvin Cook thing. That gave me a little bit of a shock, but it's good to hear.
We missed NBA Riggs' question here. He popped it in just as Drew was logging off here. He says, Drew, which team are you rooting for? What's your grade for their offseason move? Sorry, NBA Rig. We'll have to get back on that one later on.
We'll cover that when we have him back on closer to the season for some auction stuff. So we're almost at an hour here, Jeff, and I know we're going to try to our last few episodes for like 2 hours long. We try to keep this short. This just for the heck of it, though. Let's do a little 3-minute preview of what we are going to cover next week.
That's like an eternity.
3 minutes.
Like
all right.
Eternity. All right, go.
Hold on. I'm not ready, though. I got to pull this up. So,
while you're pulling that up, I know Drew already dipped off, but if you're looking for his show and you want to get in some of the auction stuff, his show is on Apple Podcasts. It's called The Auction Brief. So brief, BRIEF, like a legal brief. And so definitely give that a look.
Yes. And for this, so next week, we're going to be diving through it's an expert league, IDP, we're not going to jump into all the scorings and all that, but it's not conventional scoring. It's even scoring. So the top linebacker and the top wide receiver score the same and so on and so forth. Very complex league, 48-man roster, 17 starters, the whole runaround. And we're on round 10 right now. And let's just do a little preview of
It's me making my face about your preview.
Right here. All right. So it's the Gridiron Ratings FFL. Shout out to Jorge and Nate from Fantasy and Frames. They hopped in. We also got Murph from Fantasy Pros in there and Bradley from Fantasy Data and then a bunch of the GR guys. But looking at the draft, if you want to take notes, you can come back and rewatch this and just see how it's shaking out.
They can't see that, right? They're still looking at us. No, that you didn't add it to the stream. I can see it, but you didn't add it to the stream. So they're just still looking at us, and you're just scrolling your screen.
Oh, that's really fun.
Yeah, you're a weirdo.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. Ronnie's a weirdo.
A+. I'm a professional producer over here.
Yeah. Professional something.
So this is just a run through of how this is shaped out so far. We'll keep it simple and quick, but first IDP guy, if we scroll down, was Micah Parsons in the second round. Then TJ Watt went, and we don't have to dive through all these picks. I just wanted to do a quick scroll through so people can come back and look at this if they're doing a startup and kind of see how the experts are doing a draft if they're in a league similar to this.
Expert's a strong term for us, Ronnie. I don't know that I would put myself in that category.
I'm an expert. I'm an expert in nothing.
You're an expert at BSing mostly.
But we are down to pick 809 and Quiddy Pay, Jamal Adams, Deion Jones just went, Montez Sweat. And it looks like in this type of draft, these IDP guys and wide receivers really started to pop off in the 5th round and beyond. So we'll be covering that next week. And until then, got anything else, Jeff?
No, man, I think that's a wrap. We're right at an hour here. I love it. Want to once again thank our guest Drew Davenport for being on with us today. It was a huge deal to get him on. Especially birthday and anniversary weekend. Can't emphasize that enough. Looking forward to getting involved and making some donations to his charities of choice here with the Artemis the Innocence Project and the Artemis Center. And so if you need more information about that, we'll try and get some links in the show notes here. But yeah, that's really all I've got. Look forward to seeing everybody next week.
Agreed. All right. Well, I'm going to play this little intro, outro again, and we'll be out of here.
They have no idea where we are, who we are, where we're coming from, or who we are, where we're coming from, or who we are, where we're coming from, or who we are, where we're coming from.
Hey!
And this is the best of the best. Wow. That is football.
JK, hey, go and follow us on Twitter. It's at Gridiron Rating. I'm at Ronnie A. Evans. Jeff is at NFL_D
You
Mateo.
didn't hit the button, did you?
The website is what button?
Gridiron